Welcome to another Howard's Orchids video here in Cambridge. I'm just in time to show you this beautiful orchid which is flowering for me for the first time. This is Laelia autumnalis. Although it's called autumnalis, it seems to, at least in cultivation here, it seems to flower sort of in the winter around Christmas and onwards most years. It comes from Mexico at an altitude of around 1,500 to 2,600 meters, so quite high up, and orchid growers would classify it as cool to even cold growing. I have it growing outside in the summer, and I have it hanging up from a hanging basket bracket on the wall so that it can keep well clear of any wretched slugs or snails, because I found quite early on that the new growths, as they develop, are really prone to be eaten by any little slugs or snails that manage to find their way to the plant. This is growing in, as you can see, a sort of shallow plastic basin with some extra holes that I drilled in for drainage and aeration. It's just growing in sort of typical medium bark and nothing else. The first year I didn't get any flowers because it was just basically re-establishing itself and beginning to develop a better sort of new root system. This year I was really pleased to find that it was developing flower spikes in the autumn. And it stayed outside until the end of autumn. I only brought it indoors when it began to get a bit chilly in sort of late autumn. And I hung it up here because since it comes from quite high altitudes, really it needs to be kept cool and dry over the winter. In here, it's not really as dry as it would like. The humidity is quite a bit higher than it would prefer. The light levels are a bit low, which is why I put it near the door so that it gets the maximum amount of light. And being by the glass, it also keeps it as cool as possible because elsewhere in the greenhouse, it's a bit warm. You'll notice that this flower spike, and that's why I said I was just in time, this flower spike is looking beautiful. But this one, which came out well before Christmas and is now, the flowers are beginning to fade. Well, in fact, the flowers have faded because they've been out for about 5-6 weeks. Unfortunately, at the top of this flower spike, there should be at least 2 more flowers. And that is because, as I understand it, when the flower spikes develop, they exude a sort of gummy, sort of presumably sweet sort of exudate that I'm guessing in nature would be removed by rain or dew or insects gathering it. But in cultivation, it tends to gum up the little tiny flower buds as they develop. And the solution is to sort of spray it with water and then get a kitchen towel and dry it off quickly to sort of basically clean up the new flower spikes as they develop. Now, I didn't do that with this, and I only realised it because I was reading an old orchid journal and somebody mentioned doing this. And so that's what I did with this flower spike, and this one developed quite normally. So I was really pleased that that seemed to be the solution, and next year I'll have to remember to do that. The reason that I grow this Laelia, as opposed to Laelia anceps, which is a fantastic and very popular cool to cold growing orchid, is that, to my nose at least, this one has a much better scent. Whenever I've tried smelling Laelia anceps, I've hardly been able to sort of smell anything. It's sort of a faint scent. But on a reasonably warm morning, for the first 2 or 3 weeks after the flowers have developed, this has a really good scent. It's a bit faint now because these flowers are beginning to get a bit old. But it's a lovely, quite a rich, really worthwhile scent. And that's the reason that I grow this particular Laelia. So I'm hoping that in future years I'll be able to get a bigger plant developing with more bigger spikes with more flowers on it. This at the moment, although I'm pleased because it's the first time I've had it flowering, it's not a particularly fantastic specimen, and I'm sure that on the internet you'll see others that are much better. But I thought you'd be interested in seeing it, as this is the first time I've had it flowering. Now I'll just get this orchid down. Somebody was asking me if I had Platystele beatricis. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't have that Platystele. There are about 95 species of Platystele, which are miniature orchids from South America, where they grow high up in sort of cloud forests, so cool and damp. So as miniature orchids go, they are ideal for growing in a sort of growing cabinet or a greenhouse like this. You'll see that I got it down, I have it hanging up there, where I just sort of spray it every morning when I come in to whiz round and spend a few minutes spraying all my orchids. They're very convenient because this is growing, like most of my miniature orchids, on a tiny little cork mount. I have had this orchid so long, I can't remember, probably at least 7 or 8 years. And I would say that during that time, it has been in flower continually. The reason is that the flower spikes, and you can just about see a new flower spike developing there, as soon as they start flowering and the flowers finish, they just keep going and going and going. Sometimes for years. They are really incredible. The flowers, of course, are absolutely tiny, and I'll have to show a close-up because you just won't be able to see it otherwise. But that one's probably looking, I don't know if you can, if I get there, you can see that. The flowers, when you get up close, are so beautiful, just as beautiful as any orchid, but just so tiny. You can hardly see them most of the time. You can see that this is kept damp because it's got a sort of reasonable growth of moss on it. As miniature orchids grow, I would say that Platysteles are not too difficult. Well, the fact that I've had this for so many years, I tend to take it for granted. It just sort of sits up there. I've divided it several times over the years. When it's been on a mount for 3 or 4 years, it tends to sort of have clumped up and then start sort of falling off. So I sort of pulled it off. Well, in fact, you don't need to pull it off because once you undo the ties, they more or less just come off, and you can gently pull it into 2 or 3 or 4 pieces and then remount them. And the interesting thing is that I don't know how they manage it because there aren't many insects in here. They occasionally develop a seed pod. You can just about see this one. This one has actually split and the seeds have dispersed. Unfortunately, I've never found any babies growing in any of the pots or any of the mounts in here. It would be nice if they did. It's just not the right conditions. So this is Platystele orectoglossa, and if you're keen on miniature orchids, I would say try some Platysteles because as miniature orchids go, some of them can be really finicky, but this has proved very reliable and very easy to grow. Now, just before I sign off, I wonder if anybody could help me. Now that I've got over 1,000 subscribers, and thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed, it is just possible there might be someone out there seeing this who can tell me what on earth this Cattleya hybrid is. Somebody gave it to me several years ago. It flowers regularly at this time of the year every year. It has a fantastic scent. But I don't have a name for it. It's, as you can see, it's what you would call a unifoliate Cattleya, just one leaf at the top of each pseudobulb. It's a sort of medium sort of stature, and if I could ever get a name for it, I'd be really pleased. Anyway, that's about all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it and found some of it useful. Thanks ever so much to everybody for watching, and see you in the next one.